These 7 behaviors quietly teach people your worth. Guided by the quiet guide. You have explained yourself and still been dismissed. You have been patient, genuinely patient, and still been taken for granted. You have given the best of who you are to the people and places that mattered most to you, and watched them treat it as though it were ordinary. This is not a failure of your worth. This is the result of a gap between what you know about yourself and what your behavior has been quietly communicating to the world around you. Because here is the truth that most people never fully hear. Your worth is not declared. It is not written in a resume, defended in an argument, or proven through the accumulation of achievements that others can measure and approve. Your worth is taught. It is taught slowly and quietly, through the small things you consistently do, and through the small things you consistently allow. And if no one has ever shown you how to teach it properly, then the world has been learning the wrong lesson from you for longer than you realize. Not because you are less than what you believe yourself to be, but because there is a gap between what you believe in your private moments and how you actually move when life puts pressure on you, between the limits you know you deserve and the ones you have actually had the courage to enforce. This video is not about becoming louder. It is not about demanding respect or performing confidence or adopting the kind of sharp, aggressive self-promotion that fills the internet with noise and calls it power. This is for the quiet thinker, the person who already understands their value at a depth that most people around them will never reach, but whose behavior has not yet caught up to that understanding. The 7 behaviors you are about to encounter are not tricks or social scripts to memorize before difficult conversations. They are not a performance designed to impress a room. They are a way of moving through the world that quietly teaches the people around you exactly who you are, what you will accept, and what you are worth. Each behavior works not because it is dramatic, but because it is consistent. A single act of self-possession impresses people for a moment. 7 behaviors practiced quietly over time, over months, over years. Those do not merely impress. They transform how a person is perceived at the level of the soul. And if you are already here with me in this space, choosing this over the noise, then I want you to know something before we begin. You belong here, not because you are broken and need to be fixed, and not because you are behind and need to catch up. You belong here because you are already a person of real depth, and you are ready, finally ready, to let the world see it. Stay with me. We have work to do. Before we enter the first behavior, I want to take a moment to frame what this video is asking of you. Most approaches to self-improvement treat the work as a kind of performance. They ask you to look different to others, to project an image, to wear confidence like a costume you can put on before entering a room and quietly remove again when no one is watching. But what we are building here is something far more durable than an image. We are building a posture, a way of existing in rooms, in conversations, in relationships, that radiates something others cannot quite name but can absolutely feel. The 7 behaviors you are about to encounter work not because they are dramatic, but because they are repeatable. Anyone can have one extraordinary moment. The quiet thinker who practices these 7 behaviors across years does not merely have extraordinary moments. They become an extraordinary person, and that is what we are here to build. Before we step into the first behavior, I want to take a single quiet moment. You are here, watching this, in your own corner of the world, and there is something genuinely moving about that. If you feel comfortable, drop a comment below and tell us where you are watching from today. A city, a country, even just a quiet room at a particular hour. This community of listeners is growing in ways we did not expect, and knowing where you are in the world means more to this space than we will ever fully be able to say. We read every single one. Now, let us begin. Behavior 1. The silence that speaks before you do. We arrive now at behavior 1. The silence that speaks before you do. This is where these 7 behaviors begin to quietly teach people your worth before a single word has ever left your mouth. because what you withhold often carries far more weight than what you freely offer. The problem: there is a habit that many intelligent, deeply feeling people carry without ever fully realizing it, and it is the habit of filling silence. Someone pauses in conversation and you rush to fill the gap. Someone seems uncertain and you offer 3 explanations before they have asked for even one. A question is posed, and before it has fully landed, before the weight of it has had a moment to settle in the air between you, you are already responding. This is not enthusiasm. This is anxiety wearing the costume of helpfulness, and the people around you feel the difference, even when they cannot put it into words. When you rush to fill silence, you communicate something you never intended to communicate. You communicate that silence makes you uncomfortable, that you are quietly afraid that if the space between words grows too long, people will lose interest, form a negative opinion, or decide that you are less valuable than you are. You communicate that you need to be heard right now, because somewhere beneath the surface, you are not fully sure you deserve to be heard at all. This is the quiet tragedy of overfilling the room. Not only that it damages relationships, though it does, but that it reveals a wound you never meant to expose. And once people sense that wound, they adjust how they treat you accordingly. Not with cruelty, but with the quiet recalibration that happens when someone shows you, without meaning to, that they can be rattled. The protocol. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. The most grounded people in any room are rarely the loudest. They are the ones who wait, who allow a question to breathe before answering it, who let a moment of tension exist without immediately trying to dissolve it, who sit in stillness while everyone else scrambles to fill the air. Think about the last time someone gave you a slow, considered response to something you said. Not because they were dismissive, but because they were genuinely thinking. Did that make them feel smaller to you, or larger? Almost universally, it makes them feel larger. It signals that their words are worth waiting for, that they do not speak simply to fill space, but only when they have something worth saying. This is the first behavior. Not silence as withdrawal, not silence as coldness or indifference, but silence as dignity. The practice begins small. When someone asks you a question, pause before answering. Not a long, theatrical pause. Just a breath, a moment of genuine consideration. Let the question exist in the air for a moment before your response arrives. In conversations where you feel the pull to overexplain yourself, or to justify yourself before being asked to, stop. Let the first version of your answer be the only version. Trust that it was enough. And in moments of tension, where the silence between you and someone else becomes uncomfortable, resist the impulse to break it first. Let them speak. Let them fill it. You do not need to rescue every moment. Because the quiet thinker who allows silence to do its work is the person everyone eventually leans toward, not away from. The room does not feel abandoned by your stillness. It feels held by it. And yet, silence is only the beginning, because there is a second behavior that works alongside it, one that most people violate not in moments of loudness, but in moments of explanation. In the next chapter, we are going to examine the single most common way that deeply intelligent people quietly undermine their own authority without ever realizing it. It begins with a sentence that trails off into justification when it should have simply ended. And the moment you learn to let it end, everything changes. Stay with me. Behavior 2. The limits that require no explanation. We arrive now at behavior 2. The limits that require no explanation. This is one of the most misunderstood of these 7 behaviors that quietly teach people your worth. Because most of us were taught from the very beginning that saying no requires a very good reason. The problem: when someone asks something of you that you are not willing to give, what do? For most people, the answer involves a lengthening, a softening, a list of reasons, followed by an apology for having the reasons at all. I would love to help, but I have this thing on that day, and I have been so overwhelmed lately, and I really hope you understand. I am so sorry. This is deeply human and deeply understandable. We were taught that other people's disappointment is our responsibility to manage, that a limit without sufficient explanation is rude, and that declining without a reason is selfish. And so we explain, and justify, and soften, and then explain some more. Without realizing it, we have handed someone a map to our most tender places. We have shown them exactly which levers to pull to make us override our own limits. We have taught them that our limits are negotiable because we treated them as negotiable. Every over-explanation is a quiet signal that says, I do not fully trust that this limit on its own is sufficient. I need you to agree with it before I can feel good about it. And that signal is an invitation. The protocol. A limit is not a proposal that needs approval. A limit is an expression of self-knowledge. It says, I understand who I am, what I have capacity for, and what I will not compromise. When you explain your limits, you are treating them as drafts that are open for revision. When you hold your limits cleanly, without elaboration, you are treating them as facts. And facts do not need to be defended. The practice here is simple in concept and requires genuine courage in execution. When you need to decline something, offer a clean, kind, and complete answer. Not a cold answer, not an aggressive answer, but a complete one. That does not work for me. I will not be able to do that. No, but thank you. And then stop. Do not add the explanation. Do not soften it into oblivion. Do not apologize for having a limit that is entirely yours to have. You will feel the pull. It will feel almost physically uncomfortable to let the sentence end where it ends. That discomfort is the habit asking to be maintained. Breathe through it, because when you over-explain your limits, you are not being kind, you are being afraid. And the people in your life will learn, over time, to treat your limits as the beginning of a negotiation rather than the final word of someone who knows themselves. The quiet thinker with firm, unexplained limits does not seem cold. They seem complete, and completeness is one of the deepest signals of worth that a human being can send. You understand now what a clean limit communicates, and you may already be thinking of a relationship, a conversation, a moment, where a single unexplained no would have changed everything. But here is what we have not yet addressed. What happens when your limit is not just tested, but actively pushed, not gently, not politely, but under real pressure, with real stakes, and a room full of people watching. What you do in that moment is the subject of Behavior 3, and it is the most visible window anyone will ever have into the depth of your self-possession. Behavior 3, the stillness under pressure. We arrive now at Behavior 3, the stillness under pressure. Of all these 7 behaviors that quietly teach people your worth, this one may be the most visible. Because how you move through difficulty is the clearest window anyone has into how deeply you trust yourself. The problem. Pressure is a revealer. It does not create who you are. It removes the layers you have carefully arranged and shows the room who is actually standing there. And most people, under pressure, shrink. Not dramatically, not in any obvious way, but in the small escalations that others recognize immediately. The voice that rises a degree or two. The answers that come faster and with less care. The posture that shifts, the breathing that shortens, the composure that begins to fray at the edges. And the people watching notice. They always notice. Because what they are watching for, consciously or not, is whether you can be rattled, whether the calm you present on an ordinary day survives contact with a difficult one. When you are visibly destabilized by pressure, you communicate something you did not mean to say. You communicate that your composure is conditional, that it requires favorable circumstances, and that when things become hard, a different, less certain version of you will appear. And once people know where the floor is, they know how to find it. The protocol. Stillness under pressure is not the absence of feeling. Let me be clear about that. The person who truly possesses this behavior is not someone who does not feel the pressure. They feel it completely. They simply refuse to let the outside world become the audience for what the inside world is experiencing. Not because they are suppressing themselves, but because they have learned that their internal state does not need to become everyone else's emergency. The practice begins with breath. When pressure arrives, before you respond, breathe. A single, slow, deliberate breath. This is not a spiritual exercise. This is physiology. A slow breath interrupts the stress response before it escalates, and it resets something, not for the people watching, but for you. From that breath, slow everything down by 20%. Your voice, your movements, the pace at which you gather your thoughts. When everyone around you is accelerating, your deceleration becomes extraordinary. It communicates something almost impossible to articulate. This person has a relationship with difficulty that the rest of us do not have. This person has been here before, and they are not afraid. You do not need to pretend the pressure is absent. In fact, acknowledging it calmly is more powerful than pretending it is not there. This is a difficult moment, and I want to think through it carefully. That sentence, delivered slowly from a still body and a measured voice, carries more authority than the most aggressive proclamation in the room, because it is honest, and because it is still. And stillness, people trust. You have learned now how to be still when the pressure arrives, how to slow down when everything around you is accelerating. But there is something adjacent to stillness that is far more demanding, because stillness under pressure is one thing. Stillness in the presence of a direct attack, a misrepresentation, a diminishment that is simply unfair, that is something else entirely. And in the next chapter, we address the behavior that most people, even people of genuine depth and self-awareness, almost never fully manage to practice. The people who possess it leave every room having said almost nothing, and yet somehow said everything. Before we continue, I want to say something quietly. If this video has been sitting with you, if something in these first 3 behaviors has already shifted something beneath the surface, then you are exactly the kind of listener this space was built for. And I want to share something honestly with you. Around 65% of the people who watch here regularly have not yet subscribed. Not with pressure, not with a loud ask, just a quiet truth. If this kind of work means something to you, subscribing simply means this channel can continue reaching more quiet thinkers like you. And to our small, deeply intentional team, it would mean more than we could ever properly express. Now, let us continue. We have 4 behaviors left, and the next one will ask more of you than either of the first 2. Behavior 4, the restraint of not defending yourself. We arrive now at behavior 4, the restraint of not defending yourself. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive of these 7 behaviors that quietly teach people your worth. Because every instinct you have will say that staying still in the face of criticism is a form of agreement. It is not. The problem. Someone says something diminishing about you. They challenge your competence, question your judgment, or misrepresent your character to someone else. What do? For most people, the answer is immediate. Defend, clarify, correct the record, prove that what was said was wrong. And I understand this completely, because defending your character feels like an act of self-respect. It feels like you are standing up for yourself, refusing to allow an inaccuracy to go unchallenged. But here is what actually happens in the minds of the people watching. When you defend yourself, you validate the attack. You show that it landed. You show that it affected you enough to require a response, and in doing so, you give the diminishment a kind of power it did not initially have. The person who said something diminishing wanted a reaction. They wanted to know they could affect you. Your defense confirms that they can. And more than that, the defense often produces something unexpected in the observers around you. A quiet uncertainty. They are defending rather hard. I wonder if there is something to it. This is not fair and it is not rational, but it is how the human mind works. A loud defense creates noise, and noise obscures clarity. The protocol. The alternative is not weakness. The alternative is the most quietly powerful response available to you. Stillness. Not cold, not pointed, not accompanied by a loaded pause designed to communicate contempt. Simply unaffected. A calm, brief acknowledgement if appropriate, and then continuation. I hear you. Or nothing at all. And then you keep moving. Because your life, your consistency, your actual character in action is your defense, not your words. People who genuinely know your worth do not need you to explain it. People who do not yet know your worth will not be convinced by your explanation. The only force that shifts perception is time and the accumulated evidence of who you consistently are. This behavior requires a kind of security that many people are still in the process of building, because it asks you to tolerate being misunderstood without rushing to correct it. It asks you to trust that the truth will surface on its own, and it will. It always does. The person who defends loudly creates noise that obscures the signal. The person who stays still becomes the signal, quiet, unmistakable, undeniable. Behavior 4 was about what you choose not to say. What comes next is about something equally powerful, where you choose not to be. Because the fifth behavior does not ask how you should present yourself in the rooms you enter. It asks a far more important question. Which room should you enter at all? And the answer to that question quietly restructures how the entire world experiences your presence. Behavior 5. The Art of Selective Presence. We arrive now at Behavior 5. The Art of Selective Presence. Of all these 7 behaviors that quietly teach people your worth, this one has the most direct effect on how scarce, and therefore how meaningful, your presence feels to the people around you. The problem. Availability is not generosity. When you are available to everyone, at all times, for any reason, you have made a quiet agreement with the world. The agreement says, my presence costs nothing. My time is not precious. My attention is not a gift, it is a utility. And utilities are taken for granted. This happens slowly. It begins with a genuine desire to be helpful, to be there for people, to be the person others can rely on. These are beautiful instincts. But without the counterbalance of selectivity, they quietly erode the sense of worth that others hold for you. Because human psychology is deeply wired to value what is rare, what requires some effort to obtain, what does not come freely. This is not a cynical observation. It is simply how we are built. The people whose opinion you most value are rarely the ones who give you constant, unconditional approval. They are the ones whose approval requires something of you, whose presence, when it is offered, feels meaningful, because you know it is not offered to everyone. When you give your presence without condition, you remove that meaning. Not because you are less valuable, but because you have taught the room that the cost is zero, and what costs nothing is rarely protected. The protocol. Selective presence is not coldness, it is curation. The quiet thinker who practices this behavior does not become less warm. They become more deliberate. They choose where their energy goes. They choose whose company they invest in. And that choosing, that deliberateness, is felt by everyone. The practice begins with an honest inventory. Where are you present out of habit rather than genuine desire? Which relationships drain without restoring? Which obligations have you accepted not because they align with who you are, but because you were afraid of what would happen if you said no? Begin to pull back, gently, quietly, without announcement. Not with drama or declaration, but simply by appearing in fewer places, being less immediately available, taking actual time before you respond, and choosing with more intention where your attention goes. And watch what happens. The people who truly value you will lean in. They will reach further to maintain the connection, because they will feel the shift. They will sense that your presence is not guaranteed, and they will want to be worthy of it. The people who were simply using your availability will often drift. And that loss, though it may sting for a moment, is clarifying. It shows you exactly who was there for you and who was simply there because you made it effortless. Selective presence is the behavior that transforms you from a resource into a sanctuary. And sanctuaries are treated very differently from resources. You have learned now how to curate your presence, how to become the kind of person whose arrival is felt because their absence is also felt. But there is a behavior that works on a longer timeline than any of the ones we have covered so far. One that does not operate in a single conversation or a single relationship, but across the full arc of a life built with intention. The people who practice it do not merely earn respect. They become the kind of person others quietly study, wondering how they stay so certain while everything around them shifts. That behavior is next. Behavior 6, the patience that outlasts urgency. We arrive now at behavior 6, the patience that outlasts urgency. This is one of the quietest of these 7 behaviors that quietly teach people your worth, because it does not operate in a single moment. It operates across years, and the people who practice it become rare in a way that eventually demands attention. The problem. We live in an age of urgency. Everyone wants results now, proof now, recognition now, validation now. And when those things do not arrive on schedule, most people escalate. They make themselves more visible, seek more feedback, need more reassurance. They need to know that what they are doing is working before enough time has passed to know anything at all. This urgency is understandable, but it is quietly destructive to the way others perceive your worth. Because when you rush to prove yourself, you signal something. You signal that you are not sure the proof will arrive on its own, that you do not fully trust the quality of your work, your character, your vision, to speak for itself over time. And that lack of trust in yourself is felt. Think about the person who constantly asks, "Are we okay?" Not once from a place of genuine care, but repeatedly from a place of anxiety. Over time, the people around that person begin to feel a quiet exhaustion, not because the question is wrong, but because the frequency of it reveals a wound that cannot be filled by reassurance. And wounds that cannot be filled by reassurance eventually push people away. The protocol. Patience is not passivity. The quiet thinker who practices this behavior is not someone who waits idly, hoping something will happen. They are someone who works deeply and consistently, without needing external confirmation that the work has value. They plant, and they trust the season. The practice requires developing what some call a long timeline. When you feel the urgency to seek validation, pause and ask yourself one honest question. If no one acknowledged what you are building for the next 6 months, would you continue? If the answer is yes, you are building from the right place. If the answer is no, the work is not yet rooted deeply enough in your own conviction. Deepen the roots. The behavior that the world will eventually witness is a person who does not flinch when results are slow, who does not change direction every time the wind shifts, who does not need a standing ovation at each milestone. This person communicates something without a single word. They communicate that they know something the room does not, that the destination is worth the wait, and that they have seen enough of their own inner landscape to trust the map. And the people around them eventually begin to wonder what they know, and then they start to listen, not because the person demanded it, but because the patience earned it. 6 behaviors, each one a quiet instruction to the world about who you are and what you are worth. But there is one more, and I want to be honest with you before we enter it. This 7th behavior is the one that makes all 6 of the others possible. Without it, the silence can become performance, the limits can become rigidity, the stillness can become suppression. With it, every behavior before it becomes grounded, real, sustainable. This final behavior does not happen in public. No one will applaud you for it. And yet, it is the most important thing in this entire video. Stay with me. We are almost there. Behavior 7. The consistency nobody sees, but everyone feels. We arrive now at Behavior 7. The consistency nobody sees, but everyone feels. This is the final and perhaps the most foundational of these 7 behaviors that quietly teach people your worth. Because all 6 behaviors before this one are downstream of this one. They are only truly possible when this one is already in place. The problem: most people perform well when they are being watched, in the meeting, in the conversation, when the audience is present. But the private self, the one that exists when no one is looking, tells the real story. And here is what most people never realize. That private story leaks. It leaks into the small things. The way you speak about yourself when you think no one important is listening. The promises you make to yourself that you quietly let expire. The standards you hold in public that dissolve when the public is gone. The gap between your presented self and your private self is felt by the people around you. Not consciously, they cannot articulate it. But over time, they sense that something does not fully add up. That the confidence you project in the room is borrowed rather than built. That the composure you present is a performance rather than a practice. And something in them stops fully trusting. Not with confrontation or drama, but with a quiet, almost invisible withdrawal of the deep respect you believed you had earned. The protocol. The quiet thinker who possesses genuine worth lives the same life in both directions, private and public, witnessed and unwitnessed. What you do when no one is watching is the only real measure of who you are. And it is that person, the private person, who eventually becomes undeniable to everyone. The practice is simple in concept and demanding in execution. Every promise you make to yourself, keep it. Not most of them, every one. Because each promise broken to yourself is not merely a failure of discipline. It is a quiet vote against your own worth. And votes accumulate. Every time you wake up when you said you would wake up. Every time you do the work when you do not feel like doing the work. Every time you choose the response you are proud of over the one that is merely satisfying in the moment, you are casting a different kind of vote. A vote that says, I am someone who can be trusted by myself, and therefore by the world. This is not about perfection. Perfection is not the standard here. The standard is honesty. When you fall short, acknowledge it, correct it, and continue. Without drama, without excessive punishment of yourself, without the theater of guilt as a substitute for actual change. Simply begin again. And over time, the private architecture of this consistency becomes the most powerful thing you have ever built. It becomes the foundation that everything else rests on. The people who spend time with you will not always know what it is, but they will feel it. The way you feel the difference between a structure built on solid ground and one built on something uncertain beneath. They will feel it in the weight your words carry, in the way your presence changes the temperature of a room, in the way that being around you makes them want to be more of themselves. That is what this entire video has been moving toward. Not performing your worth, not demanding it, not explaining it, living it. So quietly, so consistently, so completely, that the world has no choice but to learn. Closing reflection. If you have stayed with me through all 7 of these behaviors, then you already understand something the people around you do not. You understand that the quiet work is the real work, that the battle for how the world perceives you is not won in the loud moments. It is won in the ones no one sees, in the breath before the response, in the limit that required no explanation, in the composure that did not flinch, in the restraint that refused to defend because it did not need to, in the presence that was chosen rather than scattered, in the patience that outlasted every urgency, in the consistency that built itself quietly, in the hours when no one was watching. These 7 behaviors are not easy. They ask something real of you. They ask you to trust yourself more than you trust the applause, to be more concerned with who you are in private than with how you appear in public, to let the world learn your worth through contact with who you actually are, rather than through the image you have been performing. And that takes time, genuine time, the kind of time that cannot be rushed, and the kind that most people are not willing to give. But you are here, and that tells me something important about you. The person who arrives on the other side of this work is someone who does not need to be told their worth. They have built it quietly, deliberately, from the inside out, and the world will feel it. Go quietly. Build deeply. You are worth every moment this requires. If life has felt loud lately, you are not alone. And if this helped you slow things down, even slightly, that is enough. If someone came to mind while you were listening, maybe share this with them quietly, not to correct them, just to offer perspective. If you found value here, a like or a quiet comment helps this space grow. It signals to the algorithm that there are still people who prefer depth over noise. And if you want more conversations like this, calm, steady, thoughtful, consider subscribing. No pressure, just an invitation. This is Quiet Grind Daily, where self-improvers reset, calm mind, consistent action. I will see you in the next quiet moment.